We got a pretty flower here, just opening the.
All right, so welcome everyone. Welcome to those tuning in online. We're great to have you. We are live in Richmond, Virginia, here at Antennae Gallery, store of Broad Street. My name is Jack Gorsline. I am the founder of Psychedelics Today, Psychedelic Writers Guild, and I'm an investigative reporter covering the politics of drug policy. I'm joined here today by an incredible lineup of local activists and scientists and business owners. We're here at least for our first panel to talk about emerging trends in psychedelic and cannabis science, research and therapies, etc. So I want our panelists to introduce themselves, pass the mic down one by one. But Maya, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little about your background.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Maya Smith. I am a fourth-year neuroscience PhD candidate here at UTU. And I am in a lab that studies the therapeutic potential of psychedelic drugs. But my dissertation work specifically looks at MDMA, also known as ecstasy, also known as Molly, and it has been looked at and it's fighting its way through legislation to maybe be decriminalized and legalized for therapeutic uses. But yeah, that's a little bit of my background.
My name is Willie Nelson. I'm the co-founder of Decriminalized Nature Virginia, and part of the organization that's spearheading a lot of the policy work in the General Assembly to help get psychedelics and plant medicines decriminalized, legalized, and accessible to folks.
So my name is Mark Tavares. I'm the owner of Rooting VA. We are a fully integrated small-scale hemp company in Virginia. So we actually make all of our soil with Virginia source compost. We grow everything ourselves. We have our own processing lab. So we basically take everything from the soil and seed, and we grow it, process it, and manufacture it into end-use products.
Plan again, pass the mic tonight, but Mark, I want to start with you, so we can work back this way. You work, as you said, in the hemp industry here. One question I'm going to start with is hemp the same thing as cannabis? And then secondly, what are some of the, we're all familiar with CBD, you get it pretty much any gas station, but there are a lot of other what are known as minor hemp cannabinoids that are active in the cannabis plant. They have a lot of different uses, and they're not all THC. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the variants of the product, the chemicals you're working with, and what they really do?
Absolutely. That is a loaded question, so I will go into it as best I can. So yes, I'm a hemp grower, and I think your first question was, well, is hemp the same thing as cannabis? So hemp is cannabis sativa. That is typically the name that everyone's looking into. Big thing is the hemp that we are growing has 0.3% THC or less. And so in order for me to grow on a larger scale, we have licenses through the Department of Agriculture here in Virginia. 30 days before harvest, everything has to be sampled by an actual agent that is registered with the Department of Agriculture. They come out, they sample it, they take it to the lab, and they give me a certificate as long as it is under that 0.3%. So everything that we grow is little to no THC. But what we have found is that with cannabinoids like CBD, we grow a lot of CBG cannabinoids and CBC cannabinoids. So those are like the three main cannabinoids that we go after. CBG is a nice kind of uplifting, focused cannabinoid. It does help with anxiety. It does help kind of get you to sleep a little bit. So it just kind of takes the edge off. You don't get any high feeling from it, but it will let you like decompress a little bit. And CBC also does help with like anti-inflammatory issues and other items in your body. And ultimately, the way that we like to work with it is as an entourage effect, right? Because you can isolate CBD, or you can isolate THC, or you can isolate CBG, but our body has an endocannabinoid system, right? And those receptors in our body react to those different cannabinoids. So if we're only getting one, it's not really getting the full effect, right? So when you get a pen that's 90% THC, well, that's awesome, right? But our endocannabinoid system is built to promote homeostasis. So it's literally built to promote well-being and calming and wellness, basically. So all the products that we create are to actually hit your endocannabinoid system correctly, and then either A, relieve those, aches and pains, or relieve that stress, or relieve that anxiety that you have. And what we found a lot, we've dealt with a lot of MS patients that have come to us just word of mouth, where they've been, they don't sleep very much, or they wake up, they're super stiff, they can't really bend their legs in the mornings, or they're struggling. And either A, the medicines that they're given from a doctor, or B, what they might be able to get from a medical dispensary here really aren't hitting that. And what we typically do is we give them a few different style products and say, okay, well, these have these cannabinoids, these have these cannabinoids. Here's your lab test, and try it. Come back, let us know how it is, whether it's like a honey product or a gummy or a tincture or, a flower product, depending on whatever their method of function really is. And what we found is, because A, we have control over the entire, from seed all the way to finished product, we're able to really kind of fine tune it for those people and get them something that really promotes health or well-being or relief. So cannabinoids work really well with our bodies, but we need a little bit of all of them. We don't just need one. So hopefully that answers the cannabinoid side of it. What was your next question?
I think those are really the two. It's happening the same thing. What can you tell us about minor academics?
Now I will say, you can go out and you can get a derived from hemp, a Delta 8, which is illegal here, never operated in that loophole, or a THCA style or anything like that. If you guys really want a THC product, grow your own, or know someone who grows their own, because they know how they grew it, they know how they fed it, they know where it came from the whole piece. Because any of these synthetic derived or highly concentrated pieces, it's not made the same way that Mother Nature intended to make this plant. So make sure you know your grower, so you know where it's coming from, and it always has a lab test. So,
Will, do you have anything to add? Working back this way.
well, that's the night to do.
Somebody who's growing at home, and somebody who's working with both psilocybin mushrooms in home grow capacity. What are some emerging trends that you've been aware of, both in your personal work with some of these medicines, but also what you've seen in research, cultural adaptation to new norms, etc.
I'd say that, like with cannabis and hemp products, trees are currently illegal in all forms in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But the thing you can do is you can buy the spores, which are like the seeds that you grow a plant with, legally. You can buy the grain that you start the spores on, and you can also buy the substrate that you take the grain and put into the substrate and grow mushrooms with. Currently, if someone were going to try to go down that path, growing it yourself is the safest way to do it, and the least likely chance of getting in trouble or anything like that. You do it in your own closet, no one else will know. And on the piece of where are you getting it from, there are adulterated products out there. There are folks who are, taking some other kind of mushroom and putting a synthetic over top of it, and it's their gummies, and you think you're consuming a magic mushroom or psilocybe cubensis, but it's really just a chemical or something like that. So I would tell folks that are looking into that realm is definitely be mindful of your sourcing, and definitely think about growing it yourself. In terms of like the trends, I know Maya's going to go much deeper into some of the specifics here, but I just want to go touch a little bit on like things that they're researching using specifically psilocybin and then other plants, PTSD, depression, anxiety, postpartum. There's early research being done and seeing how it can help with Alzheimer's, end of life anxiety for cancer patients, and a myriad of things. And for the mental health side, there's obviously chemistry going on, but a lot of the kind of mood and affective disorders, it's really looking inward and looking deep into yourself to figure out what are the things that are kind of bringing you down, whether that's past life experiences, current things you're struggling with, who you are as a person, what you believe in. These are things that I can say personally that mushrooms and things like ayahuasca, and even cannabis to an extent, have led me to ask those questions and to look at my life in a different kind of lens. So that's kind of, as a pure experiential thing, is why they're using it and researching it for so many different things, especially in the mental health space.
So Maya, one thing I'd love to start with is there's a lot of fear surrounding increased use of psychedelics. We're seeing an opioid crisis in this country. There's more higher level of substance abuse and use disorders in this country than there have been in a century, arguably. And being in the midst of a mental health crisis, people are turning to alternatives they can. As a result, folks who might align with more of the prohibitionist belief that drugs should be criminalized and legal would, have argued and are concerned that some of these substances might be addictive.
Yes.
Science tells a different story about psilocybin in particular, am I right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So psilocybin in particular, first of all, the treatment regimen for psilocybin is a very different one than what we're used to in the therapeutic world. Psilocybin can be dosed once or twice in a span of 3 to 6 months and show therapeutic efficacy for up to a year and counting, because there's still studies. Typically, when we're looking at habit forming or addictive forming paradigms, there has to be repeated rewarding stimulus. And when we're looking in rodents and in humans, we're just not seeing that with psilocybin in particular. Now, if we're talking about my research drug of interest, MDMA, that is absolutely rewarding and it is absolutely addicting. However, the treatment regimen for a drug like MDMA, the way that it has been studied in the clinic, once again, it's not an everyday administration. It is once or twice over the course of several months, and it is still showing therapeutic efficacy that is lasting for months at a time. So it's kind of getting around and cheating this. It's kind of hacking the reward effect that you might see with a more regular administration of a drug. And also, to be frank, we know prohibition doesn't work. We know criminalization doesn't really do anything but harm the people who are using these substances. So I really do think we have to be much, much more creative when we're approaching psychedelic drug use in general, especially because we're seeing a lot of these drugs being very, very helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, thank you. One thing I'd love to highlight, I'd love to talk a little bit more, is the BCU's Neuroscience Center is doing some really fascinating research, not only in psilocybin and MDMA, it's a whole host of psychedelics. Can you talk a little bit about some of the research you've been involved with, but also, how prominent part of BCU's medical system is the neuroscience department?
Yeah, so interestingly, so there's a neuroscience program, but we don't have a neuroscience department. We have a it's really silly, but we have a pharmacology, toxicology department. We have an anatomy and neuro department. But if you're a neuroscience student like me, you fall in none of those categories. You're just a nerd, which is fine. But yeah, we do a lot of really cool stuff. So my lab, since psychedelics are kind of like the hot thing right now, collaborates with everybody, actually. So we have collaborators who are looking at cancer research. We have collaborators who are looking at addiction. We have collaborators who are looking at pain medicine. If we look at anything from ibogaine analogs, DMT analogs to LSD, psilocybin, MDMA.
Can you give us a little overview of what like DMT and LSD stand for? What they are? Some folks might not know.
Yeah, so DMT analogs, DMT is a subclass of psychedelic drug. I'm going to butcher what it stands for.
It's dimethyltryptamine.
There we go. And for those of you who might be familiar with ayahuasca, DMT is a component of ayahuasca in combination with, I believe, an MAO inhibitor. And it's being looked at for its potential to help with depressive symptoms, amongst other things. But a lot of the things that pharmacologists are trying to figure out is some of these drugs have really potent effects that can also have some side effects in certain populations. So for example, if you are an individual who has a first degree relative who has a history of psychosis, or if you have a history of psychosis, you are at increased risk for something known as HPPD, which is hallucinogen persisting perceptual disorder. About 4.2% of people who consume a mind-altering drug, not only psychedelics, but sometimes even cannabinoids, experience HPPD. And so one of the things that scientists are trying to figure out is if we can preserve the therapeutic effect of these drugs while maybe lessening the hallucinogenic component. Now, there's a little bit of controversy around if we shouldn't be doing that, but that's one of the things that we're trying to at least get the answer to that question. Yeah.
One thing I'll note on, to that point, that was really fascinating research that came in a few weeks ago. I think it was the University of California, Davis. Their neuroscience lab flipped two molecules to what is known traditionally as LSD, flipped them around, and discovered that it could be an incredibly promising non-hallucinogenic treatment for schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a very difficult to treat condition. I think there's only been one new drug introduced in the last 30 years to treat it. And we're talking about something that, I can speak to the researchers that I've spoken to, some of the folks that work at labs up in Boston where there's no shortage of biotech companies. There's a lot of money being invested in non-hallucinogenic psychedelic modalities. It is fascinating, especially from a substance abuse group. You mentioned ibogaine. Will had talked a little bit about ibogaine before we went live. Can you tell us a little bit about ibogaine and also what some of the emerging research into potential for treating substance abuse?
Yeah. Ibogaine is one of my favorites. So ibogaine comes from the iboga plant, and it is actually indigenous to Western Africa. The traditional and indigenous stewards of iboga are the Bwiti people, and the very traditions, I believe. And it is a very potent and very powerful hallucinogen that first made its appearance in the West in the mid-20th century. So it was really looked at originally to one, treat alcohol use disorder, and to two, treat opioid use disorder. And it showed a lot of promise when they initially did these studies back in like the 50s and the 60s. But the war on drugs kind of put a halt to that. And also a really important thing to note about iboga is that it interacts with your herd channels, which are a channel on your heart, and it can cause cardiac arrest. So you could die. That is a very, very important actor, very important side of it. But it has shown incredible promise at treating opioid use disorder and alcohol use disorders, which are both really, really, they're really difficult to treat. So they've shown promise where others haven't. Now, I don't have a ton of hope that ibogaine itself will ever become decriminalized just because it really is that dangerous. But there have been ibogaine analogs that have been produced. We have actually several in the lab, and I did a little bit of research on that, looking at how they interact with our receptor of interest, which is the serotonin 2A receptor. And the goal is to try to not make people have heart attacks, but still preserve that therapeutic component.
There's been some interesting research into high levels of supplementing magnesium to combat the cardiac arrest. Am I right?
Yeah.
It's been really interesting.
There is, but I'm not as familiar with that part. Yeah.
Yeah. But you mentioned the synthetics piece. One of the things I think is really interesting, you mentioned obviously ibogaine is derived from the iboga bush. Ibogaine, the iboga bush is actually environmentally protected by the United Nations under, I think, the Nagoya Protocol. So synthetic, I know we've talked with Mark a little bit about how some of these naturally derived cannabinoids are actually probably better for you than some of the synthetic versions. I think there's pretty solid empirical data that suggests that. But one of the things, there's a couple of things about ibogaine that make it, I think, probably more beneficial to be taking a look at synthetics or analogs is one, it's environmentally protected, so it's going to be really hard to get naturally derived versions in the United States. And if you do, odds are it's either the product of slave labor, significant international drug trafficking operations, but also in the psychedelic world, synthetics are cheaper. Like if you can develop a stable analog psychedelic, you can make it more affordable to people. I'm not sitting here and saying that's definitely the thing that we should be doing, but I am saying that, you know, ibogaine is, to your point, the most likely version, the most likely psychedelic, probably not to be fully decriminalized. It's worth noting that currently in the state of Colorado, personal possession and home cultivation, well, you're not going to grow an iboga bush in Colorado. It's an impossible climate, but you are legally protected. You have the personal possession and use of ibogaine in your personal setting, as well as the distribution to others without remuneration. You can't accept payment for it, but that is legal in Colorado, which I think is great. It's not a guarantee to like in a dispensary. It's also going to be really hard to get ibogaine in Colorado, obviously, but again, there's added legal protection, and that I think at least is a good middle road. Want to kick it back to Mark. I'd love to hear a little bit more. You mentioned you've had some folks reach out to you with MS. What are some other? I mean, I personally am a full disclosure, regular cannabis user, mostly for regulation of my own anxiety and my neurodiverse ADHD, and it's been really one of the most effective medications that I have found personally for those symptoms. But there's a whole slew of other things that people are coming and seeking out hemp-derived products, and it's not just the anxiety and PTSD or the MS. Can you talk to both some of the more common but less known of conditions, but also what are some rare cases of things that people are coming for cannabis itself?
Well, there's a whole slew of reasons why people will come to us. A lot of it is because, well, they know where it comes from and they know where it's grown, and they have basically that whole chain under control. But we have a lot of people that come to us for like hand pain, joint pain, things like that, and they use like a Bengay or they use something like that on a daily basis to relieve aches and pains in their joints. So we make a menthol crystal and CBD lotion that does help with, opening the pores of the skin and getting in. We also make like a more broad spectrum that has no THC in it, because we have a lot of people in Northern Virginia that do contract work for the government and things like that, but they need something to relieve that pain. And, you can take Tylenol and Advil all day long, but what they notice is when they put it on, after bed or before bed, what they find is that it relieves that tension when they go to sleep. They don't have those aches, they don't have those pains. I got into CBD and cannabis because of anxiety issues. So I'm very well versed in that. And CBG is a really good cannabinoid that I have found that has helped out with it a lot. So we have those. We have a lot of cancer patients that come to us that, might have had opioid issues in the past or have been prescribed a ton of pain medication, but it doesn't really work for them. They can't find true relief, or they can't sleep, or they have, constipation problems, or there's so many issues that all of these drugs interacting with each other can cause. So we have a lot of people that will come to us and just say, hey, I can't sleep at night. What can you help me do? Or what can you do? We have a lot of people that say, I'm in chronic pain 24/7. I just need to be able to smile. I just need to be able to enjoy my life or be present in the moment. So I need something to take that edge off. And I need something to just allow me to enjoy the moments I have left. So we have made a lot of products, whether that be like an RSO or a full spectrum oil. So we're still utilizing all of the good cannabinoids in the plant, and we're not really taking it all the way to an isolated product. I'm not saying it's bad, but we do a lot of just full spectrum, full plant extract for people.
Can you explain very briefly what RSO oil is for those who don't know? there's a long history behind RSO oil, so it might be easy to cover in a couple of minutes, but
So RSO was originally a Rick Simpson oil. So basically you're taking the full plant and you're reducing it down into a very thick, dark oil. So that oil still has a lot of beneficial parts from the plant as well as the cannabinoids inside of it. So typically what people will do with that is they will put like a size of a grain of rice under their tongue, use it as more of like a sublingual style product. And that way it can get into their body and into their endocannabinoid system. So it's been proven to stop seizures in people. It's been stopped tremors. It has helped treat a lot of cancer patients get through what they need to get through. So it's no easy matter when people have to come up against, a cancer or a really, really bad disease. So our main goal is to help put them at ease and help give their body a little bit of balance.
I really appreciate you bringing up the belief that cannabis is receiving. It was a really fascinating study released in the UK earlier this week. I think it was late last week actually, but it was a 10-year study, one of the largest studies conducted across multiple universities into the medicinal properties of cannabis. And not only did it find what you have seen in your own practice and in your business, that the pain relief and nauseating relief, effects of cannabis, but also that cannabis actually has anti-cancer properties. It actually can reduce or halt the growth of cancer cells in people who are actively having cancer cells form, having a tumor grow. So I am really hopeful that companies like yours operating in Virginia can continue to provide high quality products, but also as prohibition continues to hopefully die off, I think we're moving in a direction where that might be more and more possibility. And we'll talk about the policy stuff here in a bit. There's a lot of things interesting that have been going on in Virginia that are limiting innovation. But I am grateful personally for the work that you're doing.
There are a lot of limiting factors in
Yeah,
state.
there are a lot of factors.
We'll jump through the loopholes as they change. I think I started growing in 2019 with a hemp license. And I will say, I think the laws have changed on me at least once a year, at least 5 times. So we'll keep jumping through the hoops and filling out the paperwork and doing it right.
And a really important thing to note here is the hemp farming bill, which was passed at the congressional level, I think, what was it, 2018, yeah. It was passed under the Trump administration and essentially legalized cannabis sativa at the federal level. So yes, the 0.3 THC limit is a very small amount of THC, but when you have politicians that are writing policy that they don't even understand themselves, you end up with policy that's very difficult to amend or alter in a way that actually enacts meaningful, equitable change for the people involved and affected.
It does, and there's been tons of meetings and groups, and we've tried to, advocate for, hey, let us at least talk to you or come visit our farm, see how this works. And actually, I've invited the Cannabis Control Authority here in Virginia multiple times. It's an open invitation because they need to see what the normal grower goes through. It's not always just a indoor facility. You can grow this plant with Mother Nature included and provide a phenomenal product. So we figured out how to do it here in Virginia, and we would love to be able to show that to an actual recreational market one day. So we'll see.
Well, I think that's it for our first panel. We're going to filter Maya off and jump right into the Virginia cannabis and psychedelic policy side of things. But thank you, Maya, so much for joining us. How cool is it? How cool is it that some of the most cutting edge research in the country is being conducted regarding psychedelics right here in Richmond? Somebody who lived to the last mile in the Siegel Center just a few years ago, I take a lot of pride in it. So thank you. Keep up the great work.
If y'all have any questions or are interested in anything that my lab is doing, you can find us online. We are the Gonzalez Mesa Lab. We are looking to publish some really cool stuff. We just published some stuff. Yeah.
Amazing. So, for those of you here, thanks for bearing with us in this transition. For those of you online, we're going to jump right into our state of cannabis and psychedelic policy here in Virginia. Again, joined by Will Nelson and Mark Tavares. Will, I want to start with you. You gave us an overview of some of the most recent secular policy developments. The one that I'd like to start with is what's known as a trigger bill. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but involves a very specific form of synthetic psilocybin called crystal polymorph, crystalline polymorph psilocybin. Can you tell us a little bit about that bill, about what we've done, and what some of the pushback from the legislature was?
Sure thing. So just recently in this last General Assembly session, there was a bill introduced by Senator Jennifer Boysko, who we worked with before. We did not work with her on this bill. And what happened this year is there is a company called Compass Pathways that has been doing research on effectively psilocybin and depression and treatment-resistant depression, what have you. And really the polymorph version of that really exists more so so that they can charge.
Yeah.
To get to the basics of it. It's very similar to with ketamine therapy. If you look around at that, they have ketamine clinics, it's just regular old ketamine that's been given to horses and it's been around for forever. Well, Johnson & Johnson, many years later, made S-ketamine, which is a slightly different isomer change, and so that they can then package that and then do it through insurance and basically charge you a lot more for what is virtually the same thing. So what we're seeing now for pharmaceutical companies is they're trying to get their own psilocybin form or their own MDMA form or their own ketamine form so that they can go through our pharmaceutical system and basically charge really high prices while no one can make the generic. So that's kind of an overview.
Yeah, I would recommend this is a great report that's done by Vice.com. It's a reporting by reporting shit. Look, she was one of the first reporters to kind of expose a pattern of patenting by Compass. I am not a lawyer, I'm not a legal expert. I know nothing about patent law, so I'm not here to pass judgment. I do find it very interesting that Compass Pathways is basically the only pharmaceutical company that's been researching this one very specific form of synthetic psilocybin, and then proceeded to hire a bunch of lobbyists to get very specific crystal polymorph psilocybin specific bills filed at the state level. There was a crystal polymorph psilocybin bill filed in Kansas and in Iowa and in North Carolina. There's been in a lot of conservative states in particular. And one of the things I'm very proud of is there was a state representative, I can't remember his name, who spoke out and said, why are we giving, here in Virginia, said, why are we giving this essentially like carve-out bill for when their specific synthetic psilocybin is approved by the FDA, they're the only ones who can provide it. But what it would take a competitor to catch up and start researching crystal polymorph psilocybin is tens of millions of dollars. They've been playing a 5 to 10 year catch-up game. Compass isn't doing anything legal. They just happen to find this one specific form, corner the research market on it, and file a couple of patents. But like Wilson, somebody could splice off a slightly different altered version and patent that, and then spend hundreds of millions of dollars. It's just a matter of time and resources that most companies don't have at this point. So yeah, just grateful that there was a representative here in Virginia that pushed back, but also, correct me if I'm wrong, the bill ended up getting advanced, right? The Breakthrough Therapies Act ended up dying in committee, but there was this bill in particular was advanced through committee at one point, correct?
It made it through the Senate. I'm not
Waiting.
certain if it made it through the House or not.
We'll check on that.
And then mind you, all that debate's happening in the pharmaceutical section and they're warring over that. You can still get some spores, grain, and substrate and grow psilocybin cubensis, magic mushrooms in your closet for a very, 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 very low price. And the synthetic version is not any safer.
Yeah, there have been some very interesting policy developments in other states that are trying to take a look at how we get safer supply products in a conventional or non-pharmaceutical or even a non-dispensary pathway. I know that there were a lot of folks in Massachusetts who were very concerned and chose to vote against question 4 because they were worried that even though the bill would not legalize retail sales and things like that, they were very worried saying dispensaries. Now, people's misunderstanding of that bill has more to do with public education and the lack of education, given out by the campaign that ran that initiative. It's a rant for another time. Plenty of people are going on. But I do want to pivot to Mark. The state of Virginia cannabis law is a mess. As somebody who's followed it while I was living in Virginia, I was amazed to see advancements made. I think it's worth noting, give some history, but Virginia voters, Virginia electorate, and the Virginia House and Senate have all co-signed and approved recreational cannabis sales in this state. Why don't we have recreational cannabis dispensaries in the state?
You asked me a really, really loaded question. But it's interesting, right? Because everyone is pretty much for it if you look at it. So we have bills gone through the House and the Senate, and then they get vetoed when they get to the governor's desk, right? 2 times in a row. Where when the governor first came into office, he was not putting down the idea of a recreational cannabis market. He was kind of open to it. And I've spoken to a lot of people that work with him, whether it be the Department of Agriculture or other places, that at first they were open to the idea. Now, this was years ago. And as the years go on, those people get a little more closed off and a little more closed off. And I think we've probably all heard our governor's conversations about how it's going to harm children. It is going to, every tax dollar that we spend on it, we're going to spend way more. So it's not fiscally responsible, or it's going to increase driving safety issues or public safety issues if we do legalize it and make it recreational. He has said all of those things, which unfortunately, I'd love to see all of the data that he is pulling this information off of, because I don't foresee all of that being written on paper clearly, right? So there's a lot of issues. Obviously, they wanted to take it, make it recreational. This one basically said they would give out licenses September 1, and then recreational sales would go into effect, I guess, May of 2026, which is great. I mean, that gives us time to implement an infrastructure and create a lot of things that we need to put in place to do it correctly. And also, we have states all around us where we can actually look at what they're doing, or maybe even communicate with them and say, hi, you did this. How would you do it differently if you guys do it again? So we have like every opportunity to take what we've learned from everyone else in this country that has legalized it recreationally and put a really good platform in place. But clearly that keeps getting derailed. Why is that? Well, I can't say for sure, but we do only have 4 locations within the state that sell medical marijuana. They like that they're the only 4 locations in this state that sell that. We also have Normal, which is an advocacy group here in Virginia. And in all honesty, I'm the president of a club called the Home Growers Club, where we go once a month. We have about 150 members, and we teach people how to grow. And it's all above board, it's all legal. They actually came and spoke to us a few years ago, and unfortunately, those tides have changed, right? They're mainly now advocating for a lot of the MSO style or the large multi-state operators.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really have that backing for us like we used to. Now, could that change? I do think some people on Normal, or people that might be hopefully working with Normal, do have another opinion, because there's so many farmers in Virginia that have done it right, that have the ability to put a really, really high quality product into a recreational or a medicinal market.
It's a farming state. It's worth noting Thomas Jefferson had cannabis in his garden at Monticello.
Yeah.
There's a long history and tradition of cannabis use in this country, and the human chain of consumption far predated prohibition rising in the 1920s. I think it's worth noting.
It is, and they grew it well, right? We made everything from it. It is a plant that has 50,000 plus uses. If you really want to utilize all of the benefits of the plant. So I mean, it's truly something that needs to be brought out and put a good structure around. I don't think our governor is the guy, right? I was raised Southern Baptist, I was raised against, a lot of things, including this plant. Although my grandfather was a very large tobacco farmer. So you have all of these industries, right? Like it's okay to grow that, but you can't grow this. And he's not going to be the guy because I think the people backing him don't want to be on that docket that help legalize something that will truly help our state.
Yeah, you mentioned like there are other states that we could turn to. A great, you mentioned the tax issue that Youngkin is, Governor Glenn Youngkin, for those who are tuning in live, is the Virginia State Governor. He has, said things like, that teen use or child, underage use would rise. There's pretty strong empirical data in all of the states that legalized, over half the United States and counting, that teen use in recreational legal states goes down because you can't get it. You need an ID to get you a dispensary, like you need an ID to buy liquor at the VABC.
And we all know the black market is never going to go away, right? But if we create the right recreational market with good quality products, well, we're going to have proper labeling, proper testing. We're going to have cleaner products. We're going to have child tamper-proof. Like there will be a whole lot safer products out there where even if a young child gets their hands on it, they can't open it. If we buy something from a black market right now, it's a plastic bag with a zipper on it, right? Or it might be just a very simple pop top. Well, help the younger generation.
As someone who lives in a legal area in Massachusetts and we have child safe fruit, it's hard to open them. I struggle to open them sometimes. There is technology that makes this harder for children to get their hands on. It exists. Another thing, you mentioned the tax aspect. A really great example of effective use of cannabis industry tax dollars being generated at the state level is actually Arkansas. Their governor is Sarah Huckabee Sanders, former press secretary for Donald Trump under his first administration. They have designated that I think the bulk share, if not all, of the tax revenue generated by the cannabis industry is what funds free school lunches and breakfasts and resources for at-risk kids. There are creative ways in which we can utilize effective cannabis policy to better our society and mitigate the potential risks. And I just think it's very unimaginative of the governor to think this way. Again, I think it's not really probably his thoughts. I think it's the thoughts of a lot of people that are backing him. Some of whom probably have strong ties to the tobacco industry, given we live in Virginia. But I also think that we're all sitting here, we're aware, you all and the majority of Virginians are in support. Maybe not all of you in this room, but the numbers show we've had 2 bills that have passed. The governor of Virginia is actively subverting the will of the voters, his elected constituents, and the representatives that serve underneath him. And I think that needs to be called a spade a spade.
They've done that. They've also strengthened hemp laws as well, which I'm fine. Please close the Delta 8 loophole, close the loopholes that are out, right? Because it limits the problematic products in gas stations and things like that.
Also, anybody here or anybody tuning in, do not smoke Delta 8 products. Just don't. Just do yourself a favor and stay away from it. It's not good for you.
Go find a friend who grows weed.
Exactly.
It's pretty simple. But they've put laws in place that have put a lot of us as hemp growers out of business, and that's okay. That happens. They strengthen laws, especially. It'll probably get even tighter as legalization gets closer. But that will prove that there are still a lot of really good players as far as the hemp industry that have figured out how to grow the plant, how to grow it to its perfect potential. Harvest it, dry it, cure it, and make finished products. So there are some really, really good hemp companies in this state that I do feel like when the laws come, they should visit those people. They should actually say, open the doors. Like, hey, instead of these people who have never touched the plant, why don't we actually take information from people that touch it on a daily basis? And we've gone through all of the banking issues, the credit card issues, the insurance issues, oh my God, everything issues.
Can you briefly explain why cannabis companies run into banking issues for those who might not be aware?
I started a hemp company in 2020 with my brother-in-law, and this is hemp, right? This isn't even a THC company. But we had Wells Fargo at the time just email us a check with our bank account balance and said, sorry, you're a risky business. I had 6 credit card processors in 2020, 21, and 22 that basically were like, you would do, $4,000 or $5,000 worth of work and then be like, oh, you're a hemp business or you're a CBD. Well, yeah, I filled out all the paperwork saying I was, and here are all my test results and everything. They would just cancel it. PayPal held like $3,000 for a year because they wanted to investigate that I sold a CBD product. So it was because the plant has so many, red flags surrounding it that no banking or insurance or anything really wanted to help you. So it was something where you kind of had to reach in your pockets and you had to roll the dice, which is great because we've done okay. We've done well with it and we love what we do. But it was a very difficult time to actually create a business and do well.
Now, one more question for you, then we'll shift back to what we're saying about policy. But we talked a little bit about CPG and some of the other categories. Virginia state law has some very interesting terminology in terms of what they consider to be a cannabinoid, correct? CBD doesn't technically fall under, even acknowledged.
So when they made a law that now if it's a 25-to-1 ratio, right? 25 parts CBD to 1 part THC is kind of your general rule now. When that law came into effect, it made a split CBD-CBG product. CBG doesn't create THC, so our ratio of those two cannabinoids was 34-to-1. So we were like, heck yeah, we're golden.
Mm-hmm.
Our products are still way within the laws. And the lady says, no, CBG doesn't count. We don't even factor that as a cannabinoid. It's only CBD. So our products then moved to a 17-to-1 ratio, and they were all legal the day the bill changed. It went into enforcement. So they really don't know the cannabinoids that are truly helping. They only know CBD, which is still a great cannabinoid, but there are so many others. So it does make it very difficult to produce a good full spectrum product to help people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
We'll want to get back to you, and I'd love to get your thoughts. One, what the process for bringing about SB 1101 looked like, and what were some lessons learned in advancing this bill as far as made, or some allies that you gained both in the state legislature. Give us kind of an overview of that process and strengths and coalition along the way.
Sure thing. So I want to say that I didn't have any prior experience in advocacy or policy in the science major or anything like that. I got pulled in through just doing Decrim nature and doing that. The process to get a bill into a law is a lot longer and more convoluted than you can ever imagine. It starts with a group of folks who want to make something happen, finding a delegate or a state senator to then take that idea on. And then so you write a draft of kind of what you want. And then there's a clerk in the General Assembly that basically puts that into like Virginia code law language. And that's how you have your bill that then gets submitted. And then from there, it gets assigned to a committee. It could be the courts of justice. It could be health and education. And then from that committee, there's a subcommittee vote of like 7 people who decide the fate of that bill, and it passes that. Then it goes to the full committee vote. And so then it's like maybe 15 people who decide whether it goes anywhere or not. And then once you finish all of that, it goes to a floor vote. So that's when the entire Senate says yes, no, or I choose not to vote on it at all. Mm-hmm. Then once you get all that done, it crosses over to the other legislative branch. So from the Senate, it goes to the House of Delegates, and it goes through that process again. So it's got to go to a committee, the committee votes on it, and then it works its way to a House vote. And then once the House vote, that's a yes, and that goes through, then it goes to the governor's table. And all that work that led up to that can just be destroyed if the governor says veto, and nothing happens. Which happened in Kansas, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so throughout the years, our first year was to decriminalize psilocybin and make the use and possession a civil penalty like they did in Oregon. We couldn't get that out of committee in the Senate. second year, we wanted to do a psilocybin advisory board where there would be like a task force set up to figure out how to deal with policy moving forward, but it also defelonized psilocybin and magic mushrooms, so it would no longer be a felony, it would be a misdemeanor. We passed that actually through the Senate with 3 Republican votes, which is absolutely huge at the time because everybody thought we were crazy when we talked about psychedelics in Virginia.
Yeah.
And then it went to a House committee and got killed. Third year, we introduced a veteran bill that made it through the Senate. The fourth year, we introduced a very similar bill, this time working with Reason for Hope and the Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition. And Google either of those names, those are some of the folks who are going up to Congress, to DC, to lobby our senators about allowing veterans to access psychedelic treatment of PTSD.
Shout out Jesse McLaughlin from Reason for Hope.
Yes.
Great guy. Been a huge help for the coalition, from my understanding.
Absolutely. And that ties into one of our largest growing coalition partners is actually the veterans, because as you all know, 757 is Virginia Beach, there's Norfolk, a lot of Navy there. We have a lot of veterans in Virginia suffering. I think we're like, I want to say 10th in the country for largest veteran population. We're on up there. And a lot of things that are available at the VA and just through regular mental health care is not cutting it. So the coalition stands from a lot of different things. People think hippies and college kids. We have those. We have veterans. We have parents with kids in college. We have social workers, therapists, doctors, all walks of life, all different colors, ages, because human suffering is kind of universal. It doesn't really care what we look like. From Northern Virginia to Virginia Beach to Force headquarters in Richmond, all the way down to Southwest Virginia and Southern Virginia. I spoke earlier before we started this. We had one Republican co-sponsor on SB 1101, which is the Breakthrough Therapies for Veteran Suicide Prevention Act. And one of the co-sponsors was Senator Tammy Mulchy out of Southside Virginia. And for just a little context, she's a MAGA Republican. The other co-sponsor, Senator Ghazala Hashmi, she is a progressive, very progressive. You might have seen her giving a demonstration down at the Capitol with a giant IUD inflatable. Those two people agreed on something, and it was psychedelics.
Yep.
Just to paint that picture. And we got through the Senate unanimously. We got a hold up in the House. The Speaker didn't really understand what was going on, despite the fact that he's a veteran himself. But we've since contacted him and began that outreach and to get the meeting set up to be able to talk to him. So over the course of the 4 years, the lesson we've learned is a lot of this work really happens delegate by delegate, senator by senator, working them down to email. We need a Zoom call to we need an in-person meeting where we can bring their constituents that they are supposed to represent. Politicians, we pay our tax dollars, pay their bills. They work for us. They're supposed to listen to us. So when we get folks, we're into their office and talk about how MDMA, how psilocybin, or whatever it may be, has changed their life and helped them, thoughts start to turn, minds start to get changed. And that's how we get Senator Mark Peake of Lynchburg to vote yes. That's how we get, all the Republican senators in Virginia voted yes on SB 11. So it really is like painstaking, like one by one. Somebody knows their city council person in Warrenton, Virginia, or someone knows their state delegate and have contact and can get us a meeting with them. It really is piece by piece by piece, but we can see that progress happening. with now built onto bipartisan, unanimous bipartisan support here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. This is in California, this is in Oregon, this is in DC. We're talking about Virginia.
Yeah. No, we'll wrap up here with this panel in a second, but I do just want to kind of expand on what we were saying. As somebody who's covering the psychedelics community and the psychedelics movement politically, really from the ground up, embedded with grassroots communities in states like Massachusetts and Connecticut. The diversity of this movement, the fact that the psychedelics renaissance, as it's been called, kind of defies every partisan boundary you can think of, is, I think, really going to be remembered as one of the most consequential global movements of the 21st century. It brings everybody and their mother into the room, and when MAGA Republicans and hardcore leftist progressives are insanely talking about psychedelics, nothing else is being talked about. There's so many other political issues that have some sort of middle ground consensus, that so many other cultural issues get woven into to distract the political consensus that exists. I think that's in many ways manufactured. I think in many ways it's organic. But I really do think that's what it was a 2019 study. 91% of Democrats and 86% of Republicans polled indicated that they support increased access to mental health, to psychedelics as a mental health alternative treatment. Again, just really one of the most fascinating political movements that exists currently, and is very much in line with a broader anti-establishment sentiment that exists within like the 3 to 5 most agreed upon political issues today. The other ones of which are, distrust of the two-party system, discontent with the direction our country is headed, and distrust of the mainstream media. So rope in psychedelics, inherently anti-establishment issue in itself, and you're finding incredible political unity in that space. I just think it's worth keeping an eye on, and I am fascinated by it and honored to be able to cover it. So I want to close with a question for both of you. We're facing a potential administration change, an election this fall. Regardless of who replaces Governor Youngkin in the governor's mansion, what are your predictions for the future of both psychedelic policy and potential expansion or reform of cannabis and policy in the state? Let's call it over the next 3 to 5 years.
I would say, regardless of what direction we end up going with the governor, I will say as a quick aside, we did meet with Lieutenant Governor Sears' office back in 2023. Talked with her chief of staff. We brought 7 veterans to our office. Some folks from organizations and just some folks we just know locally in Richmond area. And that was a powerful dialogue. We only had an hour. We could hardly get through those stories, but I could see in their eyes, like, oh, this isn't just something we can just brush up. And so we were then referred to the Department of Veteran Services. Jason Pott, he is no longer the Secretary of that office. So I can say this publicly now. We met with him on a Zoom call, and they were very interested in how the state can move forward and start looking into these kind of things. So that's number one. The second thing is we need to hold our politicians accountable. They're going to be asking all of us. I don't care if you're red, blue, or whatever in between. They're going to be asking you for money. They're going to be asking you to come to their campaign events, to their specialty dinners. They're raising money for their ads or whatever. They're going to be having town halls. Show up and ask them the question, where do you sit on this issue? What are your thoughts on allowing people access to psychedelics? Whether you're on the medical side, whether you're even talking from like a religious freedom side, or whether you're just talking for people's right to use a plant, ask them that question so that they know it's something their constituents care about, and that is how you force them to act and force them to consider it, because otherwise, there's just so many other things they can deal with that are easier. And they get many, many, many inquiries, and no single person, I don't care what politician is, or I don't care what person is, nobody is an expert at literally everything. Nobody is. So a lot of times you do have to have that meeting to educate them, because all they know is maybe what they got from Google search, or if they have a really good legislative aid, maybe they filled them in. My second point is know your representative's legislative aid, and whenever you contact them, copy them on that email, because they are the folks who are actually reading the emails and telling senators, delegates, whoever, hey, this is important, you should look at that. Who is my legislator? If you Google that, it will tell you all your politicians from the federal to the state to your local city council, board, or supervisor. Get engaged. Don't be afraid to show up and ask them. You might feel uncomfortable. They might feel uncomfortable. But if you don't let them know this is something that's important to me as a Virginian, as a Richmonder, or whatever, they're not going to take it seriously.
I mean, I don't think I can follow that. So did it?
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's true. You got to speak your mind, right? And you can't be afraid to stand up for what you believe. I mean, we've seen it happen, but it's a plant, right? A mushroom is a plant, cannabis plant is a plant. And when you get people together that really, really love these plants, everyone thrives, right? You don't put all these people in a room and people argue or people fight or people get drunk. No, they laugh, they talk, they tell stories, and ultimately it usually circles back to how this plant has improved their lives, right? So speak it. Like, speak it freely, tell people, tell how it's helped, and email people a lot, and stand up and just do your part. Because if we all band together, it's way better than just a few of us trying to get through and have our voices heard.
And then really quick, if you're one of those shy folks and the idea of like going out in public and asking questions just terrifies you, look at some of these local organizations. Of course, there's us. Of course, there's plenty of cannabis organizations and other different organizations who are out here doing the work. And a lot of us, we get paid $0 to do this. So when they have an event, they're trying to do a fundraiser or something, go ahead and support them or at least share about it and uplift those folks. That is another way you can get involved.
Thank you so much, guys. We so appreciate it. We hope we'll see you next. Our next panel. I do want to know the bathrooms are down there and then through the end, last two there. But yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break and jump right into our final panel on the intersection of psychedelics and religion. Well done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I appreciate it. So start back. So I'll ask you. Cover. Who's on the panel?
Honestly, the best way so I have a lot of problems. Yeah, that's all. I want to give you all what you'll find in the website is a solution. Our gummies are actually vegan and all of our flavorings are like tapioca or yeah, and I usually will like ask you what you're really looking for us to be sitting here and that way
So let's help. So much back. Oh, I.
All good. Yeah. No, they called, I didn't need to call. They asked me to say, so I moved here, a few things around and check out and run back out. Yeah, we've got a 2-year-old, and, we have like 18. Check out for about 4 hours. You know, it's like 2 days. So, yeah, they're done. Right. Yeah. I love it. So like, we love it. So it is. Yeah. Yeah, me too. We're gonna jump into our third and final panel tonight. Get you to lie down. All right. Join me. Probably just do the pass it down. Yeah. All right. Welcome back for those who are tuning in online. My name is Jack Woodline. One of the co-hosts for tonight, the Inaugural University Plant Medicine Showcase. I am honored to be joined by two phenomenal guests. I would love them to introduce themselves. This is the second simulating panel. We are in the fascinating conversation.
So, Sal, without further ado. One, great to be here. My name is Sal. I'm a founder and CEO of a company called Sapphire, which in Persian means journey. And essentially, it's a platform that allows people to integrate deep insights from their psychedelic journeys into not just intellectually, but how they live, how they process it, how they lead, how they connect to this world. So that's the marketing fancy fun way. Essentially, it's an AI tool that helps you process, communicate, and as a co-pilot, help you navigate all of that information. So we have practitioners like psychedelic assisted therapists, coaches, traditional therapists using it for their clients. And then we have folks like everyday folks like ourselves who just want a tool, might not necessarily have access to practitioners to process all of this. So, and this stemmed from my own personal journey. I'm an immigrant, entrepreneur. I went through a lot these last handful of years of my life, watching my parents go through a lot of stuff. And psychedelics came into my world recreationally, festivals, parties. And about 8 years ago, I decided to look at it in a more therapeutic way. Sat with 5-MeO-DMT, shattered my world, and that kind of took me that path on exploration, healing, and understanding. And I, for all intents and purposes, lit my career on fire, 20 years in tech, and decided to go into the space and build something meaningful that I believe is going to help a lot of people. Really quickly, could you just explain to folks who might not know what 5-MeO-DMT is? Sure. 5-MeO-DMT is a compound that derives from a specific frog. It's a Bufo alveolus frog, and it's toad venom essentially. So it has DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine. That's the compound that you have to see in ayahuasca, synthetics, and so forth. This one comes from a frog. So it's called the God molecule for many reasons. And yeah. Yeah, and a long history of indigenous use. We're going to learn a little bit more about the indigenous use of ayahuasca. Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little about you and Chacon Keep Church.
Yes, Hakoki is the only organization that we have building in North America. My name is Michael Gam. I've been involved working with ayahuasca for about 18 years now. I've had the good fortune to study with and mostly work closely with the Shipibo Konibo people of the Amazon basin. In many ways, my personal journey also led me to kind of taking up the responsibility that I'm taking in the space and doing what I can to really advocate for two primary goals. One of which is, of course, is the continued protection, preservation, and caring for the Shipibo people, culture, and medicine tradition itself, which faces a number of challenges. So, advocating for them, and also up here in North America, looking at how we're doing things, how we're building community. There's a number of ayahuasca churches and psychedelic communities, but some of y'all might have noticed that these are mostly very white European spaces. And so that's like, along with advocating for the indigenous folks and for their rights and culture to survive. I would say our second primary goal as an organization is to open this kind of work, this profound, Amazonian plant medicine tradition for more vibrant people, underserved communities. It's like the broader, I would say, big picture goal of decolonizing medicine, ultimately, but being in dialogue, real meaningful dialogue, and hopefully learning relationships with indigenous peoples.
So we'll jump right into it. I want to start with the foundational link. How do you each define the relationship between psychedelic experiences and what might be termed as religious, spiritual, or mystical understanding? So I'll start by saying I grew up most of my life having disdain for religion. I lived this truth in my mind that religion was grossly misinterpreted and used for reasons, for private or personal reasons, and for the war and destruction in this world. And it took many years to get past that. And I believe there's a lot of love and beauty that comes with religion, and there's still all of that as well. What psychedelics does, at least for me and for many people that probably can attest to this, is it helps you connect you back to God, to universe, and spirituality, with or without religion. And I think that's a really important
aspect. It just opens up the veil and says, wow, there's something deeper than just walking every day, going to work and collecting a paycheck and so forth. And that comes from this place of deep connectedness that God is within us, no matter what your religion is and so forth. So I look at it that way. Look at it opens up the veil and really helps you understand how deeply important it is to be connected to spirituality in the universe.
Well, it's a loaded question for sure. I think we have to acknowledge that European religion has in many ways been the tip of the colonial spear, as it were, and a big part of sort of dismantling and destroying a number of indigenous cultures and traditions. So that needs to be acknowledged first and foremost. And I think that, we're making some progress. I'm happy to see more and more indigenous folks being given the rights to practice their ceremonies and, practice their traditional ways, especially referring to a lot of the North American groups that, had all of that outlawed for quite a while.
Yep.
In the Amazon, some groups have survived a little more, like the Shipibo Konibo, who are the main group that I work with, partially because they were a little harder to access upriver, and for some mixture of reasons, more of their culture, traditions, and ceremonies has been able to survive in comparison with some groups. But in many ways, I would say that working with psychedelic medicines, plant-based traditions, are a powerful opportunity for folks to reconnect directly with nature. Have this opportunity to experience something that is closer to what now we generally call animism, right? But that maybe being sort of like the more ubiquitous form of spirituality or religion that would have existed for many millennia, right? A spirituality that is based in nature connection with the beings of consciousness, conscious beings that inhabit nature in many indigenous traditions.
I am going to go right back to Michael because I would love background into, you mentioned, some of the indigenous groups that you work with. Can you give some, and a lot of their culture and history. Can you give those of us who might not be familiar, at least a brief history lesson on their existence, how long they've been around, what some of the core tenets of their faith and their use of ayahuasca, really is?
Sure. Well, very humbly, I will do so because I'm not a Shipibo person. I'm a Chicano American person. Just been very lucky and blessed to have a relationship with the Shipibo Kunibo people in the last 20 years. And I've started to feel more and more like I needed to take on some responsibility and come and attend events like this to advocate for them, advocate for their neat existence in the world, as well as the application of their cultural sort of autonomy, their intellectual property that is so often appropriated. The Shipibo Kunibo people are well known throughout the world as one of the well-known indigenous groups that have worked with ayahuasca for who knows how many centuries. That's a matter of debate. And so I would say that it's a plant-based tradition. As you can imagine, these are jungle folks that have very intimate, ongoing, multi-generational relationships with these plants, these teachers that they're often referred to plantas maestras, being commonly what a Shipibo person might refer to one of these plant sets. The notion that these plants are not only medicines to ingest, but also teachers, relatives, and that if we're quiet enough, if we observe the right set of practices, we can start to listen to those teachers, and we can start to be in relationship with those teachers in a way that, it gives us a lot more than sometimes that pill that we pop, which might be a derivative of one of these plant teachers, but maybe some of that relationship is lost when we extract and reconstitute these medicines. But it's hard for me to explain the entirety of Shipibo spirituality in a short answer. but I would say it's a animistic plant-based tradition for the most part.
So we just referred to ayahuasca as a sacred medicine. That's a good segue. The word sacred is often used in relation to psychedelics, but for both of you, what does this word mean to you and your work? And in your opinion, can something accessed via plant but can something accessed via plant medicine and something facilitated by digital like so far, can both be pathways to the sacred?
I'll take this to start. You know, it's a really difficult task to build software in a sacred indigenous space. We'll just call it what it is, because that's what psychedelics mostly have derived from. Even the semi-synthetics and DNA part of this from the plant. But the way I think about it is that we have to meet people where they are. And for the most part, people live in urban environments, and using digital tools, and I'm a little biased, but from my perspective, is being able to help people connect to what these meanings are when they can't go into the jungle for a month or quit their jobs, but they can have gentle reminders that allows them to think back on the reflection that they've had with these sacred medicines and what it means for them. I'll give a specific, like a small example. I meditate every day with hape, which is it's a snuff tobacco, and it comes from a caboclo, which is a plant medicine man or herbalist in Brazil, and it immediately takes you into this space where you just are connected to the earth, and it just feels so grounding and naturistic. And what that does for me is reminds me every day of just being kinder to my children, because that's where my head goes. And it's just like, oh, your son's 4. Of course he's gonna not listen to you. Like, why do you raise your voice? I use that example only because that's sacred. That for someone is sacred. For me, that's really sacred. Now for somebody else, it could be a different meaning. And that's what I believe a digital tool can do, is like these gentle reminders, like our software does, is help you reconnect to life and nature and community. So I can go on and on, but wanted to share an anecdote there.
Thank you. Yeah, reverence. Reverence is something that we can start to access a little more through working with psychedelic medicines in general. And I think even more so when we're lucky enough to be able to experience it within a traditional context. One of these intact traditions, where people talk about the Mazatec mushroom tradition in Mexico, or the Witi tradition in Gabon that was mentioned earlier. And of course, there's nothing quite like these experiences for the holistic experience that comes with that. The grounding in community, the grounding in a tradition, which involves a number of plants and beings, not just the one psychoactive. And so, yeah, I would say in general, these are medicines that are about the restoring a relationship, and that we can begin to restore relationships that much more so and that much more deeply when we start to unpack a lot of the things that come for us modern folks as we encounter indigenous and traditional ways, and we start trying to ask ourselves what that might look like in our own lives authentically, when most of us have been raised with very little relationship in that way, with the aspects of nature or psychedelic medicine.
So that's something, of course, you probably know this more, but speaking with Shipibo and other indigenous tribes and organizations that are focused on traditional work or ancient work, ancestral work, the term integration doesn't even process. Like, they don't even know what that means. We use integration because it comes from the therapeutic, and you're integrating insights. You always want actions, and how do I take this and become a better person? And we get stuck in this, which there's obviously benefits to it. But when you speak to them, they're like, we don't even know what that means. We sit in ceremony with ayahuasca, and then our integration is sitting with elders, is being in nature, is cooking with our family. And that's what is embodied. That's what's sacred to us. I want to just throw that out there as a gentle reminder.
Is actually a perfect segue for our next question, which is really for Michael. Let's start. But ritual is central to so many religious traditions. I myself grew up attending a Lutheran church up on Line Avenue. You know, my first communion ritual is woven into so many religions. But specifically, when we're talking about the Hakon Kivi Church, what are some of the essential elements of an ayahuasca ceremony that you might be, conducting, facilitating? And how does the church support? I know we just said that integration isn't really a term that exists within indigenous communities, but what does integration look like after a ceremony? Obviously not a term that exists in that culture, but is a phenomenon that medicine, folks that have been engaging with plant medicine and ayahuasca have been integrating those experiences after the fact for a long time. So here's to get your thoughts.
Thank you, Jack. This is the work of an organization like Hakon Kivi and for people like myself that are doing their best to interface for folks between knowledge keepers, traditions, and the general public that is interested in experiencing these traditions or working with these medicines. There's need for discernment and care, again, on both sides. For one, of course, not doing that typical westernized thing of imposing our frameworks onto them, and imposing our expectations onto traditional ways. In many ways, it's a process of unlearning a lot of what we've learned in order to more understand and appreciate these kinds of traditions. However, I will say at the same time, to bring up what you were mentioning in the last question, is that, also, we need to interface with modernity. We need to figure out how to make these kinds of things more appealing to young folks. And with my organization, we're trying to tackle this on a number of levels. Whether it's cultural preservation of the Shipibo through like interviews and just trying to maintain that traditional knowledge as much as possible with elders and that kind of thing, or education for the next generation who, due to various economic pressures, are more likely to not necessarily study plant medicine. They're doing what's available to them. And nowadays you get a lot of folks like us that are more financially privileged to go down there and study Shipibo medicine. There's less and less young Shipibos. So these kinds of balances need to be worked out as we move into the future, so that these precious traditions like the Shipibo Kanemo, other Amazonian groups, and any other kind of guides and elders for us culturally that have worked with plant medicines, that have worked with psychedelics for many generations. We need to revere them, we need to respect them, we need to be in right relationship, meaning tangible, reciprocal relationships. For our organization, an example of that recently is just collecting funds for flood relief that impacted a lot of Amazonian communities in the past few months. So there's a lot of sides to it, but ultimately it's on both sides. To bring it back to integration, sorry about that. That might not be a term that they're familiar with, but there are spaces for gradual sort of innovation of the traditions, but with the leadership of the leaders of those traditions, right?
Yeah.
As we try to make the best of modern scientific understandings as well. But again, let's be careful to not be dismissive of indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing, and be careful to re-examine many of our underlying ideas about what knowledge is, et cetera, et cetera.
On that note, top of the sections for you. Hearing about the communal and ritualistic aspects of the Hakon Kivi Church, how does SFAR address the potential lack of in-person community, and really, or the embodied ritual that often demands? Sorry, I need my glasses. It's often deemed crucial for integrating experiences. SFAR is an app where I'm an individual user. Is there opportunities to find community within the app's interface, and how did you factor that into actually creating this product?
Great question. So I spent a month. It sounds more dramatic than it is, but it felt long, but it felt a month where I wrote the manifesto for the company. And the manifesto came from like, why are we building this? How are we building it? How is it going to impact people positively and negatively? And, you know, these thoughts were like, oh, I'm just going to be another tech bro building an app and you go buy it and, you know, so cool and make a lot of money. And it's like, no, it's deeper than that. And the thing that we come back to, and there's kind of two parts. One is we have an elder of councils, a council of elders, excuse me, that are from indigenous groups that work with ancient medicine, that are helping us guide how the interaction of the software works with people. So that's one that's very important to me, is that we can't do it without them. And there's reciprocity there. They're all advisors. They all have equity in the company, and we help them with whatever support they want, however they want to contribute their revenue from the company. So that's one part. The other is, in the manifesto, we talk about how do we use tools like Sapphire to get people back into community and nature. That's a really important part. It's almost saying, like, how do you use technology to get out of how do you use tech to stop using tech? And the idea is outcomes-based models using, for example, I won't go down here because I tend to nerd out on tech, but using a lot of dopamine. The other component is the gentle reminders that talk about the importance of community and the importance of nature when you're coming out of these experiences. And then lastly, there will be a marketplace that connects people with community. So whether it's like a group of people in a certain area, whether it's like a breathwork session in the DC area, whatever it may be, you have that access to connect to community as well. So.
Yeah, I do just want to note, like, you could throw a rock in the Harvard yard, and you could probably hit 3 or 4 undergrads who are all working on an app. I think you're probably surprised at how many folks are working on in the psychedelics community, that there's this really unique intersection between the tech sector and the psychedelics community. A lot of folks working on apps. I will say, until right now, learning a little bit more, having gotten to know you, am not aware of any other psychedelic apps that have that reciprocity focus built into the company's leadership. There's another really great example of this in the pharmaceutical industry, where a smaller pharmaceutical company based in California, I believe, partnered with the Maori people in New Zealand, indigenous population there, to study a specific part of their genetic makeup that I think led to a breakthrough treatment for sickle cell anemia. And they were given, it might be I might be misnaming the condition that they were looking to treat, but they gave every single participant from the Maori tribe equity in the company, and then a guarantee of essentially the royalties from sales of the drug. There are innovative business solutions that build equitable access and real, equitable input from underrepresented communities into the next generation of these tools. And I don't think that enough folks, for example, in the tech industry, are working on it. So I just want to applaud you. It's really bold and really brave. And I also think it sets a new standard. Moving on. So, Michael, this is for you, kind of in response. Seeing the potential reach and personalization of tools so far, do you see value? And I think you've answered this previously a bit, but what value do you see in incorporating some of these modern tools and frameworks within traditional practices? What are some pitfalls that you might be wary of?
Well, a lot of things, like even just in general, the study of plants. I think anyone who's aware, I don't know if Will's around, but the study of plants has been suppressed in our society, in our culture, in general. There's certain kind of party lines that are out there about the complexity of plants, that for that reason they can't be studied effectively as medicines, et cetera, et cetera. Of course not. It has more to do with what was starting to talk about earlier, patents and money making. And these are some of the traditional ways in which colonization has been working within the space in and around plants. So these are some of the things that need to change, but if we could turn belief into a brighter world, I could see a lot of beautiful things happening, like more plant information databases being available on the internet about, say, all the plants in the Amazon. But again, in my perspective, that should be headed by folks like indigenous medicine people that are the biggest stakeholders of this kind of knowledge, and the folks that can best share it with us, the rest of us, ignorant city folks. And so that's I do want to think about the optimistic futures, but I guess I'm not concerned about all the work that needs to be done first. And just that we all in our communities and in our businesses and in general should be asking ourselves, especially if we're trafficking in anything related to infrastructure or anything related to any particular stakeholder, it's like, how is that reciprocity in action? And is it real? Is it tangible? A lot of companies I respect, they're now just putting all their financials out. That's great. I wish more of us were ready to do all that because, there's just even a lot of folks now that can signal and say the right thing on social media, but they might not be doing much, really.
I'll just add really quickly, for some of you have heard of the eagle and the Congo prophecy. It's the old world and new world, right? There's an inflection point in this world where old knowledge meets new knowledge, and you have to incorporate it. And at the end of the day, we cannot stop using technology. It's just literally part of our lives. And technology has been around for many, many years. And when I mean technology, I mean all aspects from thousands of years till now, which more computations. I'll go quick story. A few months ago, I was in a mushroom journey, and this was the beginning of the year, and I had these questions came up, like, what the hell am I doing? Is this right? Is this wrong? I really wanted to respect, the sacred and the indigenous practices. And in this journey, I had this very deep conversation with whatever this entity was, and it said, AI has been around for millennia. It's not artificial intelligence, ancient intelligence, and we're just catching up to it. And you just have to understand that it's going to be embodied in our world. When you're sitting in these medicines, that is technology that is going through your mind, like the fractals and geometry, and then the knowledge. That's all tech. It's just we think of tech as like a laptop or AI, and so I'm going on this tangent is like, yes. The newer generations need to feel that we live in a Western society for the most part, and knowledge transfer, the best way to do it is technology. There's no other way that you can learn about the Shipibo tribe and live in, Richmond or in California, because you can, unless you go there and spend a week. But you can go on your computer and Google it, or go on AI and say, give me an in-depth knowledge of the Shipibo experience and what you can learn from it, and it will extract it. Now, it won't be everything, but at least it will give someone like, learn and meet with folks like Michael and really get into what that means. So again, I'm not saying it's the answer, but it's a path to a connection.
Well, I agree with parts. The other parts I'm a little straightened out. Because maybe I should have included it earlier that, again, like I want to preserve this knowledge, but there's a lot. I think a lot of indigenous thinkers right now are talking about the dangers of AI. There was a lot of abuse, trafficking in general with indigenous language with AI. It's still very much not a resource for indigenous cultural information. I'll say for now. But I do agree with parts of what you said about like re-examining how we look at what we think of as technology, respecting ancestral technologies, respecting the wisdom and knowledge that is there from before. I'm not sure that it's the same, but this is one way we can kind of re-examine our frameworks and hopefully eventually arrive at system medicine, the technology world that has done some of these journeys of questioning and begun to dismantle the many ways in which they are products of colonization and white supremacy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate the back and forth. I think, being able to have real discourse in a live audience is really important both for us and for the folks in attendance. We're gonna have just a few more questions, and I would love for Michael to be able to talk a little bit more about what's been going on, some of the flooding that's been occurring in the Amazon River Basin, and how you might be able to support most of the indigenous communities, but also what he's doing to help with those communities. But first, I guess, to start to wrap things up, psychedelic experiences aren't always blissful. A lot of us here, and a lot of the folks at Vigilance have talked about how psychedelics really benefit them, and they've talked about some of the really positive aspects of those experiences, but they can be really challenging and distressing. How does your framework, both going to Kiwi Church and as far as support individuals through those difficult experiences? And what are some of the tools that you would recommend for integrating those challenging aspects of a psychedelic experience into a meaningful manner?
That's a big one. So I'll caveat one that obviously I'm not a medical expert, and I'm basing this on the knowledge that I have and my own experiences. There's a bad trip, and then there's a dangerous trip. And the dangerous trip is like if you have psychosis or interactions with current drugs that you're on and it doesn't work well for you. That's a dangerous trip. I can't speak on that. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff there, harm reduction. From a bad trip component or perspective, I think the stuff that comes up is meant for you, meant to come up for you. And it's a lot of insights and learning. And I come from a practice where I embrace those bad trips. I embrace them. I'm like, oh, this thought's coming, or this vision that I'm having. Instead of fighting it, which makes it worse, I'm like, okay, I'm here. I'm gonna breathe into it. Let's talk about it. Let's embrace this bad trip, bad conversation. Because on the other side of it, there's relief and there's learning and all of that. So I say all that to say is, for example, with our tool, it just goes back to insights and understanding. You're not broken. What you saw was potentially an interpretation of something else. Like, oh, this was scary, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It's almost like a dream interpretation. So it's all about understanding and learning from it and getting insight. So again, I'll say that bad trips, not dangerous trips, are actually really beneficial when it comes to healing work, understanding, etc.
Yeah, well, I'll echo a lot of that. I agree with a lot of what you're saying there. That a lot of this kind of deeper work with ayahuasca or mushrooms, that's more about, what we call healing, deeper therapeutic work for folks, is going to involve a degree of discomfort, right? And in general, when we're working with plant medicine and more natural medicines, there's more presence required by the patient. Less disassociation, less, extraction, less taking a pill that solves things for now. And starts to, ask the patient that wants to engage with herbalism, that wants to engage with psychedelic medicines for their personal healing, to be more involved in their own process, right? And in that, there's more experiencing of discomfort with hopefully a lot of profound benefits. And maybe the reason why a lot of us are gathered here, right, is this notion that you can do some really powerful learning in a few nights of good, high quality ceremony, therapeutic environments. Yeah, see, and then we ask about bad integration, bad trips and safety. Well, as far as safety and discomfort, I would say that, different medicines have their different properties. I'll say that with ayahuasca, of course, it's important to observe a set of general dietary guidelines before ceremonies.
What are some of those dietary guidelines?
The classical ones across most groups are, no alcohol, no red meat, no pork, and that's to prepare for the ceremony itself. And then there's something else that I didn't even really have a chance to get into, which is a longer-term dieting of plastic plants, which it's not necessarily psychoactive plants, but that involves even more restrictions to sort of be able to receive the medicine of those plants more effectively. Yeah, the dieta, that being a big aspect of the Shipibo medicine system, and maybe I don't get
Do it? Yeah. If you want to give us, maybe at the end.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'll give a few more examples.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I will say that preparation of diet, and, working with safe people, setting all these types of things, can reduce a lot of discomfort, can reduce a lot of things getting in your way, so that instead of being able to process that childhood trauma, you're just like dealing with that hamburger weight, right? So it's like, so it's like you can get some of those obstacles out of the way. You might do a little deeper work with, forgiving your mother, or whatever.
I'll say real quick, is like the set and setting is important, right? Like, I think most of you know this, but set is the mindset. So how are you preparing yourself? Clear-headed, you're not like arguing with your spouse, or like you're trying to clear your mind as much as possible and have intentions. And then the setting is the environment, right? Are you in a safe space? Are you with people that you trust? Is it beautiful? Is it, all these things that you're comfortable? So at the end of the day, you have to surrender to these thoughts, because when you don't surrender, like it's really hard to heal or do the work, and it gets really, really uncomfortable. And from a scientific perspective, which I won't go too much because I'm not one, but the prefrontal cortex is shut off. That's your executive function. That's your ego. That's telling you like you're safe. Do I need to make decisions and all of that? Well, that shuts off and it opens up other areas of your brain where now you don't have the front telling you to suppress these thoughts and these feelings, and it comes up front and center. Like, okay, yeah, I do have mommy issues. Let me talk about this and work through it. So I just want to add that.
Yeah, no, thank you. We'll close with this, and then Sal and I will exit stage right, and we'll let Mike close with both an overview of what he thinks is important, to be aware of right now with monkey beans and what these indigenous populations are struggling with in the Amazon River Basin. But from both of your unique vantage points, where do you see this intersection of both psychedelics, religion, but also potentially technology heading in the next 5 to 10 years? What's the best case scenario, and what might be the worst case scenario?
I think the positives are some of the things that you mentioned, is meeting people where they are, new world and old world. Like at the end of the day, technology is going to help a lot of people understand what religion is, understand what spirituality is. I think there's a lot there because there's such pre-existing notions. There are things that have been wired in our minds and brains from cultures. Like as my example, I was born in Iran. We fled in the 80s during the war because of the Islamic Revolution. So I grew up in a household that despised Islam, right? Because they translated Islam to death and misfortune, and it's terrible. So I grew up in that space. But then as you get older, you start realizing, or at least for me, it's like, no, there is something deeper than that. Not all Islam is bad. Not all, religious people are bad, and psychedelics helps with that, and knowledge helps with that. And then I would say the negative aspects of technology and religion is indoctrination. It's going back to what we mentioned a bunch of times, like into the hands of the masses, because that's what tech can do. So it can be used for very bad purposes. And then there are going to be, unfortunately, bad players in this intersection of technology, religion, and psychedelics that are going to take advantage of people, because they're going to use the tech. Unfortunately, I don't want to put it out there, but they're going to use the tech to guide people in the wrong direction. It's like, hey, look, now, Jesus is real. Why don't you give me all your money, right? And then it's being able to do something like that. So that's like the good and bad for me, how I look at it.
Yeah. Probably not the guy to ask about religion and tech as much, but I will say, yeah, that in general, I feel like a lot of our fields are going through a process of decolonizing. I'm happy to hear more people using that terminology and start to understand what that means in various domains. A number of years I kind of was waiting for more people to talk about it.
Yeah.
There are now more and more wonderful news out there that I admire, whether it's someone like Dr. Jen, her book Decolonizing Therapy, I think is a wonderful book that, although it's more designed more for therapists in general, I think is full of things that anyone working with psychedelics needs to consider. And yeah, same with technology, same with all these things. I think it's kind of obvious the battle that's happening right now with information, politically speaking, trying to erase and just keep out of schools all that incredible work that has been done by leading Black thinkers and Indigenous folks, and they're just trying to keep that out of our collective consciousness. So there's definitely a lot of push and pull happening, and I think if we can follow Indigenous folks and queer folks and Black folks in how to redesign things, we might have a chance.
So I'll add one more thing. It was kind of on this note, but the conversations we've had already, I've been thinking about this a lot, and it's coming up as a topic that I want to continuously bring up is accessibility and equality. The laws in this country are written for privileged white people. There's no doubt about it. There's stats, there's data, all of it. And until we fix that, it's going to be really hard for people of color, people of underrepresented communities to want to go into a field like this or even sit in psychedelics because it's a felony. And who's the majority of the population who's drug chargers in our prison system? Black and Latinos. So until we fix that, this is great. This is a privileged crowd, right? Like for the most part, and like we have access. Like we all have access where we can. But when you think deeper, it's like that's where the work needs to happen. And until we do that, like, again, it's only going to be a certain set of people that are going to.
I know we've said those new last question, but I am very curious. Who are some folks, thought leaders, peers of yours, that are advocating similar areas or even in the same that you think we should be hearing more from?
I think some of the people like SSDP is doing a lot of work. Heroic Hearts with veterans. Oakland High Fae is doing
Shout out Reggie Harris.
Yeah, Reggie Harris. Like I don't know him personally, but I follow him and like incredible work to get front and center with the Black community, the underrepresented community. Those are the ones that come to mind specifically. Yeah.
I'm working closely with some really great Shipibo folks in their 30s and 40s that are starting to talk a lot about the issues that exist in the field, the colonization that's happening in the space, and how the Shipibo culture can protect itself moving forward. And there's a lot of good things happening in that regard. Last year, there was the 5th, I think, Indigenous Ayahuasca Conference in Brazil. I would look up the letter that they released from that. There's a lot of really good, clear language starting to come out from these Indigenous leaders, not only the Shipibo Canoe, who I mostly work with, but many other Ayahuasca Indigenous using groups. I must fall back this way. One of those individuals is Walter Lopez, who is the president of the Shipibo organization for the Onanyabo, the traditional ancestral healers, the Onanyas. And we recently put out a video with him asking for some flood relief support, and where he kind of was really wonderfully point blank with the public and the audience about asking for support, especially from those people that have come to work with the Shipibo and received healing and received benefit in their life from working with and experiencing this tradition, and asking them to now give back. Because unfortunately, in the last few months, many thousands of homes have been lost, a lot of crops, and it's been a really, really hard kind of catastrophic flooding year for a lot of the people along the Ucayali River there. I'll pause there.
It's good. It's perfect. I also want to note one of my favorite voices in this space is Gina Giorgio of SSTP. You mentioned that I do a little bit of work with SSTP as their part-time media coordinator. I'm very proud of being affiliated with their organization. I also want to note the entire party of the POC Psychedelic Collective, mutual friend of Michael's and ours, based in New York City. They're really elevating the conversation on the East Coast about psychedelic use in POC communities. I also want to shout out the Entheogen Milano Collective based in Boston, my good friends Julian Fox and Imani Temple Brown, who are really bringing Boston psychedelic, POC psychedelic community of Boston back to life, and are really doing some great work. So there are some phenomenal thought leaders in underrepresented spaces, and I really hope that we can be hearing more from them in the years ahead. I want to thank both Michael and Saba. Thank you. Give them a round of applause. Live stream, but I would love for as soon as you do that, Michael, the mic is yours. What should we know about what's going on in
Share a few more minutes.
Of course, absolutely. And then if anybody has any questions for Michael or for Saba, feel free to talk to them afterwards as well. Thank you all. All right. For those of you online, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.